gets me excited every single time I see one of these videos drop, because I know they're going to be hilarious. The first time that I saw Nakey Jakey was when he did a review or retrospective look at the Pizza Hut PlayStation demo disc, which, as weird as it is, was a huge, impactful moment for me. It was my introduction to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, which led me to one of my favorite things in the world, which is skateboarding. And yeah, so when I first saw Nakey Jakey, I was like, holy shit, this guy gets it. I can relate to this guy in a big way. And throughout watching his videos, I have thought, I guess, damn, it's like every time I watch a video by this guy, I just relate to him even more. Which, this next video is an odd one, because this may be the first one where I don't relate to what he's fucking talking about, because this video is about FromSoftware's game design, and evidently it changed everything, according to Nakey Jakey. And as you know, these games are ones that I just can't get into, because I am terrible at video games, and they punish you. If you're looking to get your ass handed to you, this is a great selection of games to jump into. So, see, I knew Jake. I knew you would be down for this one. I know Nino's down for this one. But yeah, we're going to jump into this. Hell, it just dropped like a day ago. It's already got 1.1 million views. Nakey Jakey is a super talented guy, so I'm stoked to see what he has to say about this. Maybe there's some convincing to be done for me on this subject. Maybe he'll be able to sway me in a way that none of you guys could. Let's just check this out, ladies and gentlemen.
FromSoftware's game design has had an undeniable and profound effect on not only the gaming industry, but the industry of Jacobs,
the Jacob industry,
such as myself. With the massive success of Elden Ring, FromSoftware has further established that a merciless, uncompromising, gameplay-first design philosophy with little hand-holding or assistance can also still be a massive success that millions of people will connect with and absolutely adore. I am certainly one of those millions. And while typically brilliant, I also believe that FromSoftware's games are unfortunately far from perfect, and Elden Ring is sadly no exception. And I want to talk about it. But first, I must warn you that I will be spoiling the absolute Moonlight Greatsword out of all of these games, so if you haven't experienced them for yourself, particularly Elden Ring, I strongly suggest you hit pause on this video and go savor that experience first and come back in about 200 hours, because it is quite possibly the greatest experience I have had playing a video game in my 28 years of holding a Player 2 Mad Catz controller that isn't actually plugged in. Regardless, I believe it is no exaggeration to say that in the world of video games, FromSoftware has truly changed everything.
All right, here we go. Well, I guess that's the way it goes. I guess there you have it. I was gonna watch this video, but now I'm not. I guess I have to play Elden Ring now. Oh, what are the comments saying here? Chad, turn this off and play Bloodborne. Listen to the man. Go play them, Chad. This is a threat. Turn off the stream. Go home, you loser. Sorry, Chad. No reaction today. Play them all. Even the Jedi series, since they're basically soul games. Upload a full walkthrough of Elden Ring, then you can watch. Alright, no, we're watching the video. Sorry, guys.
Demon's Souls was released in 2009 for the PlayStation 3 and was nothing like other big games coming out at the time, especially in 2009. In a year where games were becoming more and more cinematic and accessible and forgiving to a casual audience, Demon's Souls crawled out of a wet crypt and said, "I will kill you." Demon's Souls, like all the Souls games that came after it, is a very challenging and unforgiving video game, a difficulty that fans of the series often lovingly refer to as hard but fair. So let's maybe settle on hard but mostly fair. After joining FromSoft in 2004 and working as a coder on the Armored Core series, Hidetaka Miyazaki took over as director on a struggling high fantasy project that was running into some serious issues during development. Because the project was already seen as a failure inside the studio, Miyazaki was basically like, I'm gonna take this thing and I'm gonna take it out back to the garage. I'm gonna do some stuff to it. Inspired by FromSoft's own Kingsfield series, Miyazaki wanted to make a dark fantasy, gameplay-driven experience in collaboration with Sony Japan Studio. A challenging but rewarding experience that took gaming back to its basics, something he felt was dying out at the time. During development, Miyazaki actually tried to keep the harsh difficulty aspect on the low from publisher Sony, fearing that they might want to change it for being a bit too extreme, much like a BMX riding video game. That sucked. Breaking down the basic gameplay of Demon's Souls will effectively break down the basic gameplay for all of the Souls games that followed, because the very core design pillars have gone largely unchanged. It starts with a character creator that, before you say anything, I know, it gets better with time, that lets you pick a starting class, dictating your capabilities with different weapons or magic. A third-person lock-on camera system for combat that improves on the Z-targeting system that Ocarina of Time introduced back in 9.8, that you can control the camera and attack people at the same time, which was kind of a breakthrough in and of itself. Animation-based combat that requires you to commit to each action and wait until the animation finishes before you can do something else, along with managing how that action affects your stamina bar, or in the case of casting spells, your magic bar. But I didn't raise you to cast no spells. This is a Claymore household just like my father and his father before him. A dodge roll that contains invincibility frames, or iframes, meaning that if you time your dodge right, nothing can possibly hurt you, similar to action games like Devil May Cry. Corpse running, where if you die, you drop all the currency you've racked up from killing enemies, and you gotta make it back to that spot without dying, otherwise you lose it forever. Passive and non-passive online interaction, where other players can leave helpful tips, or whatever the opposite of a helpful tip is, along with summoning or being summoned as a random cooperator to help, or invasions to either kill or be killed. And you know, the gameplay of each individual Souls game obviously goes a lot deeper than that, with different complex systems and healing items and stupid convoluted bullshit like world tendency that you need a fucking master's degree to understand. But the challenging and methodical combat system, that has always been the beating heart of all of these games. A heart that's married to another heart. Exploration. You know how in my Rockstar's game design video, I really harp on how those games constantly berate you with hyper-specific instructions and yellow map markers and assume you have the IQ of a tiny baby rat? Yeah, the Souls games do like the exact polar opposite. The tiny baby rat is now actually a boss, and you have no idea what the fuck is going on. And what makes exploration so compelling in Demon's Souls, and really all Souls games, is that it is true exploration that really makes you feel like Batman. No, it really makes you feel like an explorer. There is no detailed map that you can rely on and consult, only your own sense of direction and understanding of a space. This, along with a strong challenge and an actual fear of having something to lose with the corpse running system, makes discoveries and victories feel that much more meaningful and rewarding. Because you really feel like you, the player, actually charted and conquered a space and overcame a significant challenge, instead of just watching fucking Wally do it in a cutscene. The Souls games have very few cutscenes or long, unskippable passages of dialogue by NPCs, or RPG conversation trees where your choice actually doesn't really matter. Instead, the story is discovered and slowly unraveled by the player through observing their environment and reading item descriptions and inevitably watching Vati Vidya videos, because I don't understand any of this. So you're saying the rat was like a king at some point, or? I appreciate Miyazaki's approach to storytelling though, because it's very unique to the medium of video games, and was actually inspired by his real-life experience of reading English language sci-fi and fantasy books as a kid that he couldn't fully understand but would fill in the gaps using his imagination. The story is so much more about the general mood and atmosphere and feeling of exploring a place rather than scripted plot points or set pieces. The innovative online elements of summoning random strangers to help you out was actually inspired by Miyazaki's real life as well, where after his car was trapped in snow on a hill, a random group of strangers showed up and helped push the car out of the snow and then mysteriously drifted off into the night like ghosts, drifting in and out of his world at a poorly framed pace, 30 frames per second. These games also have some technical issues. Demon's Souls was not an immediate success. Sony decided to not publish it in North America after feeling pretty negatively about it before its release. During the Tokyo Game Show in 2008, Sony president Shuei Yoshida played it for 2 hours, couldn't get past the starting area, and then stopped playing and said, this is an unbelievably bad video game. This is the same guy that years later would platinum.
I get that.
Way hard. From Software changed everything. The titular line. It wasn't until later in 2009 when Atlas would publish the game in North America that sales would slowly start to pick up and critics would start to take notice. Western audiences generally loved it because apparently we're all sick, masochistic bastards, and GameSpot even gave it their Game of the Year. The same year that Uncharted 2 and Modern Warfare 2 came out. But along with establishing the core pillars of what a Souls game would be, it's important to talk about just how brave Miyazaki, FromSoftware, and Sony Japan Studio were for making such a different kind of game. Demon's Souls was a huge risk, an imperfect, weird, brutal passion project that was expected by everyone to flop, but refused to compromise on its design goals and eventually found an audience that really connected with it. In 2 console generations later, an extremely faithful remake was published by Sony as a launch title for the PlayStation 5. And there you have it. That's it. That's the end. It's the only game they ever made. I love Dark Souls, but I also hated Dark Souls. My brother Isaac had played Dark Souls sometime after its release in 2011 and had repeatedly told me to play it. I eventually finally tried it, got past the tutorial section after a lot of struggling, made it to Firelink Shrine, wandered the wrong way into a graveyard full of skeletons, as I know a lot of people did. That graveyard eventually became a dark tunnel of skeletons that killed me a bunch of times, and then I promptly said F this game and stopped playing. I can't remember for what exact reason, but a year or 2 later, I tried the game again, probably because of my brother's insistence, once again, the bastard he is, and it was different. This time it stuck. Not only did it stick, but it seriously changed my life. I know that sounds super dramatic, but like it completely changed the way I look at video games and why I like to play them, and made me want to talk about them more and examine them. And it absolutely ruined most other video games for me, because once I finished it, nothing could fill the giant rat boss sized hole in my heart. Now, if I were to go into all of the reasons why Dark Souls is so significant in gaming history, we would be here all day, and my editor would absolutely hate that.
I am going to kill you.
But on my road to eventually talking about Elden Ring, I do need to touch on 3 crucial aspects that vastly improved on Demon's Souls game design. Super Exploration DX Turbo Edition with f***les. Estes Flask, I hardly know her, as best as I can. And atmosphere, you've been seen. I feel you inside my screen. I also didn't like that. What I mean by Super Exploration DX Turbo Edition with f***les is that Dark Souls fundamentally changed how level design and world design worked within this gameplay formula that Demon's Souls established. While Demon Holes over here had a hub world that let you freely fast travel to different zones of varying locales and difficulty levels, Dark Souls over here took a lot of its zones and stacked them on top of each other like a stack of pancakes, and made sure that even if some pancakes have chocolate chips or some pancakes have bananas, that they all seamlessly flow into each other and make sense as one cohesive world in this beautiful interconnected short stack of pancakes. Blighttown is like a pancake made out of pigeons. During the first half of the game, you have no
What?
fast travel, and all of the areas are connected in multiple complex ways like a maze. So there's this palpable sense of danger and tension that slowly rises as you venture deeper and deeper into this beautiful, mysterious world that is very clearly inspired by Berserk, which is amazing. That tension is brilliantly paired with the new addition of bonfires, resting points that let you catch your breath for a second and spend your hard-earned currency from fighting enemies and bosses on leveling up your stat points and refilling your much-needed Estus flask. I am of the pretty firm opinion that the healing mechanics found in Demon's Souls and Bloodborne and kind of Dark Souls 2 are vastly inferior to the standard Estus flask system found in the other Souls games. The Estus has a specific amount of healing charges that you can increase throughout the course of the game, and the only way to refill your charges is by resting at a bonfire, which also respawns all enemies in the area. Not only does this provide an extra incentive to seek out and discover bonfires and push on while exploring, but it solves the dumbass problem those other games have where your healing items are a finite currency that you can run out of. Meaning that if you're struggling with the game and you keep dying, and you will likely have to halt progression just to go grind mobs of weaker enemies for healing items or currency that you can then spend on healing items and not leveling up, which feels so unnecessarily punishing in a game where enemies do this to you. With the Estus, you at least know that for the next bit you have a guaranteed specific amount of heals, and much like a survival horror game, the goal is to get to the next area using as little Estus as best as you can. I think one of the greatest single improvements over Demon Holes over here is the atmosphere. I will never forget how it felt to get lost in this world, struggling my ass off through Undead Burg and Undead Parish, and finally being rewarded by finding that shortcut back to Firelink Shrine and hearing that comforting music creep in. That seriously changed the trajectory of my firstborn son's life. He's getting into Brown now. Journeying all the way down to first the depths, and then Blight Town, and then finding the entrance that's a secret to the Great Hollow, and making my way down that, and finally ending up at Ash Lake gave me a feeling that I will forever cherish. The inability to easily fast travel back up to Firelink Shrine after I journeyed all the way down there simultaneously had me terrified and also in complete awe of the vertical scope of this world. And there's so much of this game that you can just completely miss. FromSoftware doesn't care if every player sees all of the content that they made for this game, and that makes finding the stuff that you do find feel that much more special and memorable. I know it's just all smoke and mirrors and code and textures, but the illusion that FromSoftware sells here is a powerful one. Except for some clearly unfinished areas towards the end of the game, but those don't exist. You made Lost Izalith up. Gaslight, gaslight, gaslight. Unlike Demon's Souls, Dark Souls was a pretty instant success. Critics loved it, and the game reached a much larger audience right off the bat, thanks to Bandai Namco publishing it all over the world on PS3 and Xbox 360 and PC, with one of the most janky PC ports to ever exist. Shout out Games for Windows Live, RIP. This also annoyingly led to so many industry heads resorting to the phrases, "It's like Dark Souls," or "This is the Dark Souls of blank," when in reality, all they're trying to say is that it's hard. Going to Arby's is like the Dark Souls of going to Carl's Jr. Hollow Knight is very clearly inspired by FromSoftware's approach, and that game is undoubtedly the greatest Metroidvania ever made. I fucking love Hollow Knight, primarily because it perfected a design aspect from Dark Souls 1 that FromSoftware themselves kind of started to abandon with subsequent Souls games. Non-linear exploration. Shut up already! Jesus, that guy loves to talk. Hi, I'm Jakey, and Jakey,
oh my God,
attorneys at law. Here at Jakey, and Jakey, we have a lot of expenses. And a lot of those expenses are monthly subscriptions that we totally forget we're even paying for. Well, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is an all-in-one finance platform that helps you save more and spend less. This personal finance app allows you to manage subscriptions, lower bills, build a custom budget, and grow your savings all in one place. We personally use it to identify and securely cancel recurring charges or unwanted subscriptions, all with the simple tap of a finger, which is a godsend for the social anxiety of having to actually call people on the phone to cancel stuff. What is this, fucking 1882? Columbus sailed the oceans 11? We also use it to track our monthly spending and set budgets. Rocket Money notifies us if we exceed that budget, along with showing our spend to earn ratio every month, quarter, or year. Also, if you're like us and gonna turn 29 this year, maybe you're starting to pay a little bit more attention to your credit score. Well, Rocket Money alerts you of important changes to your score and also offers you insights on ways you could improve your score as well. To save more and spend less, join the 3.4 million members using Rocket Money. We've got the hookup. Go to rocketmoney.com/NakeyJakey or click the link in the description to get started for free or unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/NakeyJakey to get started for free. Get your money right. All right, now let's get on back to Naked Jake in the curious case
Naked
of the
Jake.
floating rake. With this guy never even beat Digimon World 2. That's a real Souls game. I'm out of here. Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, and Dark Souls 3 all have much more straightforward progression paths than the first half of Dark Souls 1. And while a lot of areas in these games are technically connected and sometimes offer alternate paths, the general world design is far less interesting from an exploration point of view. And it doesn't mean that these games are bad. All of these games probably each deserve their own 40-minute feature presentation breaking them down, but for the sake of what I want to get into today, I'm just going to give you the Spark Notes version. Dark Souls 2 dropped in 2014 and was received well and sold well. It further grew the Souls game community and deepened combat systems while adding stuff like power stancing. Miyazaki didn't direct this one, and it does show. The atmosphere of each zone feels a bit random and unconnected from the overall world, but the boss fights and DLCs are great, and the game enjoyed a large online community for shit like PvP. Bloodborne was developed alongside Dark Souls 2 and was released exclusively for the PS4 in 2015, and I used money from a car accident to buy a PS4 and Bloodborne instead of paying my rent. And contrary to what my financial advisors might be saying, and Logan Roy looking ass, I'd say it was a wise investment. Directed by Miyazaki, Bloodborne felt like the true follow-up to Dark Souls 1. At least for people like me that just want to swing a big sword and fucking parry everything. Bye-bye magic. Go back to fucking Waverly Place. Faster combat that rewards aggressive play. Intricate and varied weapon movesets. An atmosphere that just drips out of your TV with such dedicated attention to detail and talent in the art design department, and rats. Dark Souls 3 dropped in 2016, and by this point, the Souls series was poppin' and beloved by many people. Directed once again by Miyazaki, DS3 did everything right on paper. It kept some of the faster-paced combat and fucked up enemy designs and boss transformations from Bloodborne, while also returning an expansive armory of weapons and magic, lending to a buttload of different kinds of builds. It has a large amount of fan service and callbacks to Dark Souls 1 and some of the hardest bosses seen in a Souls game yet. It also just feels really good to play and looks beautiful, but also something about this formula was starting to feel just a little bit stale. Don't get me wrong, playing through Dark Souls 3, especially doing co-op boss fights with my brother, was some of the most fun I've had in any of these games. But that strong sense of exploration felt in Dark Souls 1, that feeling of charting your way through a mysterious and dangerous world, I longed for that. The Dark Souls series had completely shaken the game industry and clearly inspired other developers to change how their games were designed and played. But playing Dark Souls 3 felt a bit like listening to FromSoftware's greatest hits versus hearing the band's new album that would maybe take them someplace new. Little did I know, FromSoftware was in the studio working on their In Rainbows, as in the album In Rainbows by Radiohead, as in Radiohead's best album, as in Elden Ring.
Here he goes.
Some of you might be wondering, Jacob Matthew, why did it take you so long to make a video on Elden Ring? and I have two answers for you. A, last year I was very busy working on an album called Romcom, shout out jakeymerch.com. And B, this game is just too damn big and felt too daunting to dissect and talk about, and I also just wanted to keep playing it, but I feel like I'm finally ready to get into it with my support group. That's you. This is all of you. Where do I even begin though? Elden Ring isn't perfect, but that's also what makes it so compelling. It's not properly balanced. I mean, none of these games are. They never have been. FromSoft has pretty clear favorites when it comes to certain weapons and buffs and spells. You can absolutely break these games in half if you really want to. But the sheer depth of content that Elden Ring slowly unveils to you during your 200 or so hours of playing it, the childhood fantasy of exploring a fantastical, magical world filled with swords and beasts and, you guessed it, rats, is fully manifested in a way that knows no contemporary. There is no other Elden Ring than Elden Ring. This isn't just the Dark Souls of Dark Souls. This is the Dark Souls of Breath of the Wild. This is the Dark Souls of Red Dead Redemption 2. If you took a time machine back to 2003 and showed my wooden sword in the backyard swinging ass that this is what was coming in the future, I would have shot you in the head and called the cops. Elden Ring is truly the adventure of a lifetime. But because I've already spent so much time talking about the core design pillars that all of these games share, I want to instead focus on certain pillars that Elden Ring innovates on or potentially fails to innovate on. Exploration and scale, dungeons and dragons, starring Chris Pine, and difficulty and accessibility. Where Dark Souls 1's world is like a short stack of pancakes, all connected, Elden Ring's world is like a giant stack of pancakes, and you took all those pancakes and you spread them out across a giant table. And most of the pancakes are touching each other, and some of the pancakes have other pancakes hiding underneath them, and other pancakes might transport you to far pancakes in f***ed up ways, and some of the pancakes are on fire and make you feel fear. I don't want to be in this Denny's anymore. Miyazaki has stated that Elden Ring is the closest thing to his ideal game that he would personally like to play, and that going open world enriches this ideal experience that he's trying to achieve. A game where if you saw something over there, you could actually go over there. A game that isn't open world just to be in the same category as some bloated Ubisoft bullshit, but a game that's open world because it needs to be. In order to fully capture the fantasy of being an adventurer in a giant world and riding across a vast landscape on your trusty steed, you first need to have that vast landscape to really nail that feeling. Elden Ring was inspired by Breath of the Wild, and it very clearly shows, because like Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring knows and expects that your curiosity will naturally lead you to finding interesting things. There doesn't need to be an overwhelming list of things to check off or obvious map markers going, over here, it's fucking over here. Because that would totally rob the player of a true sense of mystery and discovery when exploring this massive world. Elden Ring is very okay with hiding its hand. This is what the map looks like when you start the game, and this is what it looks like when you finish the game. And these are the pancakes that are cooking underneath you the entire time. Having a chest throw a smoke grenade at you in the starting area and being transported and waking up in one of the most giant late game areas and checking the map and seeing it zoom out like that was an experience I will never forget. And the lore behind the lands between is so rich in detail and intrigue. Miyazaki's style of storytelling through gameplay, combined with the Bible of world history that George R.R. Martin developed for this game, will leave an MF feeling like goddamn Amy Adams, as in downright enchanted. I know I haven't mentioned Sekiro once in this video because it's technically not a Souls game, but it was a crucial stepping stone towards Elden Ring's development. The addition of a dedicated jump button may sound like a simple thing, but it completely changes combat and the way you navigate this world. Exploring the lands between over like 200 hours rivaled the experience I had exploring the first half of Dark Souls 1. They both hit really hard, but for different reasons. The first half of Dark Souls 1 hits hard because of a lack of a fast travel safety net, meaning you become very intimate with your surroundings and the world design nearly suffocates you with its complexity. It suffocates in a good way. Elden Ring hits hard not only because it marks the return of multiple areas connecting to each other with a very non-linear path of progression, but because of just the sheer scale of the world. But because the sheer scale and intrigue of always wanting to see what's around the next corner is such a big part of this experience, much like Breath of the Wild, the game won't ever hit quite as hard on subsequent playthroughs because that main draw of discovery is no longer there. This doesn't mean you shouldn't play multiple playthroughs of this game because, oh my god, weapons and spells and armor sets and ashes of war and summoning salt videos, quest lines that you can super easily miss, and you will because they're super convoluted and hard to follow. You should definitely play the game a second time. But I will say that on my second playthrough, I definitely wasn't as eager to revisit all of the content once I knew what was exactly around every corner. Elden Ring has a massive amount of unique and amazing content to experience. But there's also some super not amazing content in there too. In Joseph Anderson's review, which is great by the way, he talks about how amazing his first fight with a dragon was. And I completely agree. That first encounter with a dragon in that big ass wet field or whatever, like breaking all of the physics objects, it's amazing. It's such an awesome gameplay moment that is just naturally experienced in your world. But I also agree with Joseph's point that because the game ends up having like a billion other dragons that you find, there's seriously so many dragons and they all mostly have the same moveset, it kind of takes away a bit of the oomph of that first experience. It doesn't mean that first experience is invalidated or made bad, but more so it's like if you ate pizza for dinner every night and eventually you were like, all right, I don't really want to eat dragon pizza anymore. Can we have like rat pizza, Mom? The same goes for a lot of Elden Ring's catacomb dungeons. Similar to the Chalice dungeons in Bloodborne or the shrines in Breath of the Wild, the quality of experience you might have in one of these copy-paste interiors is a bit of a dice roll. In all of the Souls games, you never know exactly what items you're going to find as rewards while exploring, but the areas and bosses are usually so interesting to look at and explore that the real reward is really just getting to experience that area and fight that cool boss. So even if the reward is something you're never gonna use, like another fucking spell, you don't really regret doing it because it was a really cool experience. The same does not apply to Elden Ring. All of these catacombs are not created equally. Some will have a cool and unique boss and a really useful piece of loot, and others will have a boss you've already seen a bunch of times and an item that you will forget about the second you leave the catacomb. Funny enough, this is actually a problem that's remedied by a second playthrough, because if you have a wiki open, you can just avoid doing all the dungeons that aren't worth it. But on a first playthrough, the one that's the best and the most memorable, you don't know what all of these have. So if you're like me, you're probably going to do all of them and get pretty burnt out on fighting the same little statue fuckers and these pieces of shit. For the most part, the enemy and boss variety on display in Elden Ring will blow your back out most of the time. But seeing unique experiences that you've cherished, like the reveal and spectacle of fighting Astel, natural born of the void, get copy-pasted into a separate dungeon, or fighting a godskin fucker, or both of them for like the 5th time, it's a bit disappointing. The nice thing about Elden Ring though is that you technically don't have to do most of this. If a boss is too hard or if an area is too annoying for you, you have so many other options of things to do and bosses to fight and places to see. But this also potentially leads to some issues with the game's design. Previous Souls games that had a more linear progression path could quickly halt your progress with a super tough boss, and you would have to either grind enemy mobs for souls to level up or just slam your head against a wall until you hopefully eventually break through. Elden Ring, being mostly non-linear, actually remedies that problem and finally adds a sort of difficulty slider to the Souls games. If a boss is giving you a swirly, just go do something else. Maybe find a better weapon, learn some new skills, or spend time practicing your parries against weaker bosses. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff you could do. Then once you're better prepared, head on back to that boss that was fucking you up and say, "It's opposite day, you slug." Huzzah! Wow, that's pretty amazing, right? This makes the game so much more accessible and less intimidating to a new player that's never been beaten to death by a rat before. But this system of sort of choosing your own difficulty could also potentially rob you of a compelling experience. This game is so goddamn big that there's bound to be stuff in the early areas that you won't find until way later in the game. And when you do find it, maybe it's a super awesome, unique boss battle with like a really cool reward that you beat in like 2 hits. In some cases, this feels amazing. It fully feeds into the power fantasy of wanting to make the biggest fucker alive and can be super satisfying to just totally fart on a boss that once had you breaking 2x4s from Menards over your leg. But sometimes it can feel underwhelming and disappointing. I think the fact that the game doesn't have level scaling for enemies is much better than an alternative where it did. Because level scaling can often make a game world feel pretty artificial and your progression feel pretty meaningless. But I do think there's a world where you could have a bit of both. I think if you visit areas in the game that you're very obviously over-leveled for, the game could maybe flash a little prompt that says, hey, do you want to make this fight scale to your level to maybe make it a bit more satisfying, and maybe we give you extra runes as a reward for upping the difficulty? I would love that. Mark Brown of Game Maker's Toolkit makes a great point in his video about how Hollow Knight actually changes the layout of early areas and ups the difficulty of enemies to keep things more challenging and interesting later in the game. And I think that's a great example of something that Elden Ring could have potentially done as well. Speaking of rune rewards for defeating enemies, holy shit, they are all over the place in this game and make like zero fucking sense. Donkey talks about this in his Elden Ring video, and I wholeheartedly agree. Like, the difficulty of an enemy does not correlate to how much money you get for defeating them. It's honestly ridiculous in a lot of cases. Also, let's talk about respeccing stat points. Once you defeat Renala at the Wizard Academy, Raya Lucaria, you unlock a way to use specific larval tier items to reallocate all of the stat points that you've spent money on. And this is amazing. This means that if you find a weapon or spell that you really fuck with but don't have the stats for, you can retool your character to be able to use them and switch up your playstyle and experience one of the many amazing builds that you can do in this game. So why the fuck can't you do the same thing with weapons? Elden Ring offers no way of transferring or respeccing weapon upgrades from one weapon to another, and it makes zero fucking sense to me. You find so many fucking cool weapons in this game, and it is a total pain in the ass to make switching to them actually viable. Yes, you can find the smithing bells that let you buy an unlimited amount of upgrade resources from the merchant, but A, what if you don't find some of those bells on your first playthrough where you're not looking stuff up? And B, I don't understand what the harm would be in letting you get back some of your upgrade resources from a weapon if it meant that that weapon went back to its base level. Right? You would be so much more excited to find shit, even if it's something out of your typical wheelhouse. The Resident Evil 4 remake, which is fantastic, by the way, I talk about it on my second channel, Jaquan the Jeek will like, subscribe, rate, comment, 5 stars, lets you sell weapons you've upgraded back to the merchant, and you get most of the money that you've put into upgrading that weapon, which is amazing. So why can't Elden Ring have the same thing? Another thing that can feel so ass backwards and outdated are the NPC side quests and how you progress them. These games have always had super convoluted NPC side quests, and I know it's partly because Miyazaki knows that with the internet,
I love that helmet.
Gonna get
That's so
together and
funny.
figure it out so you can afford to make it complicated and whatever. I get that. But I still think that some of these more basic ones should be doable by just using your common sense. It's one thing to have NPCs not progress their dialogue or do something until you go rest or leave the area when it's a smaller, more linear game. But it's an entirely different thing to have that same bullshit in a massive open world game where people are supposed to move around from place to place, but will never do it while you're watching them, so you gotta go rest at a bonfire, and then wait, no, wait, I messed up, you gotta rest again to load the guy in, because it's not nighttime if you rested and then died and then came back. Like, what the fuck? I went where the fucker told me to. Why does this require so many other extra unseen steps? I only bitch and moan about this because the
Dude, a
writing
turtle
and
poke?
voice
That's
acting
fucking
in this
awesome.
Game is so
Or tortoise.
so good, like so heartbreakingly good, and because the storytelling and lore bits are so few and far between, you'll fucking chase after whatever scraps you can find. But at the end of the day, I make these videos to criticize the things that I love. Video games. I love them so very much. And I love Elden Ring more than most other video games. I am so eternally grateful to be alive in the same timeline that From Software is cranking out games of this quality. Elden Ring is not only a continuation of the Dark Souls franchise, it is an evolution of From Software's trailblazing game design. A design that I think defined the last 10 years of gaming, and with Elden Ring could very well define the next 10 years of gaming as well. A massive journey with some of the most beautiful vistas I've seen since Windows Vista, and some of the most challenging, grueling bosses that I have taken on and overcome since Windows Vista. Thank you to Hidetaka Miyazaki and From Software for taking a chance with Demon Souls. Thank you for making some of my favorite games ever made. And thank you for watching this video. I'll see you later, gamers.
First off, I want to, all of you, let's give Nakey Jakey a round of applause there. Why? Because he put so much passion into that video. That video right there was made by a guy who didn't just want to make content for YouTube, but he had to get something off of his chest. This was a passion project. It shows, and I know near to nothing about those games. But I'm saying it right now. This shit makes me want to play Elden Ring. This shit makes me want to jump back into that and give it another chance, and maybe get some guidance by some of you guys who have more information and are better suited to play those games than I am, because I have ducked, dipped, and dodged the Soul games for a long time. Elden Ring was my first moment of dipping my toes in it, but it would be really fucking cool to be able to enjoy something like that, especially because Elder Scrolls holds such a huge place in my heart. Morrowind was a game that I feel about Morrowind the way that Jakey is saying that he feels about the Souls games. And Oblivion was in the same way, and of course Skyrim was the same way. Those three games for me are I guess the closest thing that I have experience with on like a super deep and personal level. My entire view of video games changed drastically when I started playing Morrowind. So yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that. And I don't know, man, just seeing someone this passionate about the game and explaining some of the complexities of it and the reasons why things are the way that they are and how that can provide so much value to the experience of playing the game. I don't know, man. It kind of just makes me want to give it another shot. I don't know. What do you guys think? I would love to hear what you guys think. Let me know down in the comments. Because yeah, I mean, I'm definitely considering it at this moment. I do like difficult games, but I don't know. There was something about the first Soul games that I tried. I'm not really sure. I think it was Demon Souls, that felt kind of like I needed to learn how to spam combo moves and shit, like a fighting game or something. Like, I don't know. There was just something about that turned me off to the point where I just wasn't interested in it. But I would have to say that I was much more interested in Elden Ring when I was trying it out. But I'm, after watching this video, heavily considering learning a bit more from you guys and, you know, my friends, and trying to get some guidance on how to play these games and give it a shot to really enjoy it, because I love fantasy games. I'm a huge fan of, you know, the Lord of the Rings and Elder Scrolls and Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. So why not? Why not give it another shot, I say. So I have been convinced by Nakey Jakey, and I appreciate him for making this video. If you guys haven't subscribed to his channel, it's something that I would highly suggest that you do, because he's got some incredible content. And like I said before, man, the guy just has a way of connecting with me through his media. He has a way of making me like relate to what it is he's saying, and I really appreciate that. So if you guys enjoy it, you should give him a subscription. You should like his video. It'll be linked in the description of this video. Also, if you enjoyed my reaction to this, you could give me a like. You could subscribe to the channel. You could even request videos you want to see us react to in the future, because Nakey's usually with me and we do reactions together, so that would be pretty cool. But for this one, that's going to do it. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.